Donald Trump has spent years turning intelligence into part of his public image. Whenever criticism builds or pressure rises, he reaches for the same claim: high IQ, genius, smartest person in the room. In this fictional dramatization, that familiar boast finally collides with something far more dangerous than outrage: calm scrutiny. The moment begins during a live television segment watched by millions. Trump appears confident, standing at a rally podium while proudly declaring, "I have 180 IQ, folks. A stable genius. The smartest person ever to run for president." The crowd in the clip erupts. But later that same night, Stephen Colbert walks onto the stage of his late-night show with an energy that immediately feels different. The applause is loud, the lights are bright, but Colbert himself seems unusually restrained, sharper, quieter. He reaches his desk, pauses for a moment, then looks directly into the camera. Tonight, he says calmly, "We're going to talk about something Donald Trump never stops talking about: how smart he is." The audience laughs softly. Behind him, the rally clip begins playing on the large studio screen. Trump repeats the now familiar lines about genius, IQ, and being intellectually unmatched. Colbert lets the full clip run without interruption. Then he freezes the image on Trump's confident grin, and suddenly, he says nothing. The silence stretches longer than expected. The audience starts shifting in their seats, because the absence of a joke somehow feels heavier than a joke would have. Finally, Colbert leans forward slightly. If someone has to announce their brilliance every time a camera turns on, he asks quietly, who are they really trying to convince? The audience reacts immediately, but this laughter feels different, less playful, more reflective. And then the moment changes completely. A second screen lights up beside the stage. Donald Trump appears live through a surprise video call, smiling confidently from what looks like his office. The audience gasps as Trump immediately jumps into the conversation, speaking loudly and trying to dominate the exchange from the first second. "Stephen, let me tell you something," Trump says. "I'm the smartest president we've ever had, Wharton. Perfect memory, highest IQ." But Colbert never raises his voice. Instead, he quietly presses a button beneath the desk. Trump's audio disappears. The image remains on screen, Trump still talking, still gesturing aggressively, but now completely silent. The audience erupts. The contrast is brutal. Trump appears louder than ever, yet the room belongs entirely to Colbert. "We'll come back to you in a minute, Donald," Colbert says calmly. "First, let's talk about the story itself." Then, without dramatic music or flashy presentation, Colbert reaches beneath his desk and places a plain manila folder in front of him. No theatrics, just paper. The audience leans forward instinctively as he opens it slowly, turning pages one at a time. Every movement feels deliberate, controlled. "Donald loves talking about Wharton," Colbert says evenly. "Top of the class, genius-level performance, perfect scores." He lifts the first document toward the camera. But the actual records tell a much quieter story. The room stops laughing. Colbert explains that the records show average to above-average academic performance. Solid grades, nothing catastrophic, but nothing resembling the myth Trump spent decades building around himself. No honors, no elite distinctions, no evidence supporting the image of intellectual dominance he constantly projects. And that's where the atmosphere shifts from entertainment into something else entirely. Colbert flips to another page. Then another. He reads portions of old professor comments describing Trump's work as rushed, surface-level, and overly dependent on bold claims, rather than detailed reasoning. The room falls silent. Not because the comments are devastating on their own, but because they directly collide with decades of public self-promotion. Trump, still visible on the screen, begins reacting furiously despite having no audio. His face reddens, his gestures grow sharper, his frustration becomes obvious. Meanwhile, Colbert remains calm. "This isn't about calling someone stupid," he explains. "It's about the distance between the story and the record." That line lands hard, because suddenly the conversation isn't about intelligence anymore. It's about performance, about branding, about repeating something so often that people stop questioning whether it was ever true to begin with. Trump's audio eventually returns, and he immediately explodes into accusations, fake documents, rigged television, dishonest media, low IQ critics. The louder he becomes, the quieter the room feels, and that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Colbert never competes with the volume. He simply keeps returning to the same calm point. "If the claim is real," he says quietly, "why does it need constant promotion?" For a brief moment, the entire studio freezes. Then the audience erupts into applause, not because Colbert insulted Trump, because he slowed the myth down long enough for people to examine it, and that becomes the true turning point of the night. The loudest voice in the room suddenly sounds fragile, while the calmest one sounds undeniable. By the end of the segment, the manila folder remains sitting quietly on Colbert's desk like evidence after a trial. Trump continues shouting from the screen, but the energy has already moved away from him. And that is what lingers after the cameras stop rolling. Not the anger, not the insults. Just one uncomfortable realization hanging in the air. Sometimes a myth survives only because nobody ever forces it to sit still long enough to be measured.